So this board has a twist in it. That should not be moving. It's 3/4 inches in thickness, and this would be about the maximum thickness that I would attempt to fix. Anything thicker than this, I wouldn't bother trying to fix it. I would just plane out the twist. So this should look parallel, but you can see the right side of the far end is higher. And I can see a teeny bit of cupping as well, but that's not so bad. As a frame of reference, this is a twist, this is a bow, crook, crown, and this is cupped. Anything crowned or cupped I don't bother fixing. I just plane it out flat and square them up. Same with crooked. I just cut them down until they're true. Anything bowed or twisted I will attempt to fix, but only if it's under 3/4 inch in thickness. So I just wanted to show what happens when you apply water to just the one side. This is a 1/4 inch plywood. It's pretty flat. And I'm just going to spray the one side. Now I'm going to let this soak. And I'll repeat this maybe 4 or 5 times. Okay, so now this side is completely soaked. You can see parts of it is peeling off. But you'll notice it is now bowed. So this happens because when wood fiber takes in water, it expands. So the wet side essentially gets longer while the dry side stays the same. But because they're connected to each other, the only way that it can accommodate this, the difference in the two lengths, is to bend itself. And it's this principle that I'll be using in reverse to fix the bows and the twists. Now if I were to leave this to dry, it'll probably return to its flat original form. So part of fixing it this way involves preventing the piece from going back to its original shape. Okay, so the way I have this set up, this side I'm essentially clamping it so nothing moves. So both corners are secured. And on this side, I've clamped one of the corners with a 2.5 inch spacer block. So I don't want this to move either. Once the board is completely soaked on the top, I'm going to start tightening down the left side here. After soaking it for about ½ hour, I note the initial height of the corner and then start clamping it down so that the new height is about 1/4 inch shorter than the starting height. I will do this every 20 minutes, reducing it by 1/4 each time while making sure that the top stays hydrated. It's been a few hours. The shop towel is looking kind of dry. But so far, you can see I've clamped it down quite a bit. If you compare the winding stick at the far end there versus this one at the front, which doesn't want to focus. Anyways, I'm shooting for around 3 to 4 times the initial offset. So if the twist was raising this by 1/4 inch, then I want to counter it by 3/4 to 1 inch. So on the straight edge here, the pencil mark is at 2 3/4. That was the initial height to the bottom of the board. And now it's at 1 7/8. So I went another 8. So now it's at 1 3/4. And I've let this completely dry overnight. I don't want to release it when it's still wet. So now, when I undo this, it's going to spring back up. There it is. And at first, it might look like it's been overcorrected, but it isn't. So right now, it looks like it was overcorrected, but I assure you it is not. The wood is actually still moving, you just can't see it. So you're gonna want to give this a few hours for it to come to a full stop. At that point, you have 3 outcomes. 1, you guessed the compensation correctly and the board is good to go. 2, you didn't compensate enough and need to do another session. Or 3, you did overcompensate and now you got to do a session in reverse. In this case, the compensation was correct and the twist got fixed, so I was able to continue on with the glue up process. Probably helped that I had to do this a few times already with other pieces from the same stock, so I kind of knew how much to correct going in. So on to the next issue, which is drilling the holes for the hinge boss. But what happens when you drill the wrong spot? So what happened here is that I was a turd. The left side is correct, the right side is wrong. Why? Why would you do that? That's how it's supposed to sit. I'm thinking what happened is I got the diameter of the hole, which is 35, mixed up with the distance from the edge, which is 22.5. So I ended up drilling the hole 12.5 millimeters further in. I'm going to fix this by making a plug that fits the hole exactly and re-drilling over it. I'm using the same Forstner bit with just the outer cutting tip to scribe the size of the hole. Then I shave off as close to the line as possible. So that's what I end up with. And now I'm going to smooth it out with the rasp. I got glue inside the hole already, and I'm just going to put some on the edges of the plug. Trying to match the grain direction if possible. And now I'm going to hammer that in. I'm going to wait for it to dry. So there it is sanded. It's not an exact match, but it's not really visible unless you open the door and look. And also, it's going to get covered up mostly anyways. Now with the holes plugged, I can drill the new holes where it's supposed to be. So with that sorted, I went ahead and installed the hinges. Got to mount it to the carcass. Install the poles. Install the stop. And that was that for the upper wall cabinet. Before moving on to the third issue, I just want to show I did make the last of the drawers for the lower wall cabinet. Again, if you're interested in how any of these were made, each of them have their own episodes, so you can always refer to those. But in any case, with the completion of the very last drawer, that was that for the lower wall cabinet. So finally, the last issue, which is the fridge cabinet. So for the time being, I'm going to ignore the debate on how useful these are, being that they're quite high up and extra deep at 29 inches, and whether or not I should have just chosen the decorative trim kit and not bothered with the space at all. Instead, I'm just going to focus on the main issue, and that is, what happens when the space that the carcass is supposed to fit into is framed at a square? The height to the corner on the left side is 11 5/16, but on the right side, it's only 11. If I wanted to bring up the right side to the correct height, I would need to remove this much, essentially requiring me to reframe this corner and refinish the drywall. If I bring down the left corner and cover up the gap, then the height doesn't match the cabinet beside it. I'm going to rebate the upper trim here, leaving a little less than 1/16 of an inch. I basically have one shot only to make this right, so I'm gonna stay away from the power tools and just take my time. The thin, flexible blade of the pole saw was quite useful here to keep the cut flush to the top. Took about 15 minutes for the first one, but I was able to get the horizontal cut done relatively easily. Before starting the vertical cut, I used the rebate plane to make a couple passes along the marked line so that the saw blade could have a little wall to register against when making the cut. The wall essentially acts as a guardrail and prevents the blade from jumping the edge and damaging the front. There it is, leveled. It's about 1 millimeter lower than the oven cabinet, but without a laser reference line, it's very hard to tell. Just to wrap this up, I also made the bottom trim for the fridge using 3/4 inch poplar to match, pressed in the magnets, and got it installed. which was the last thing remaining for this side of the wall. And that's about that.